We'll go ahead and get started. And I just want to say thank you for everyone joining us today for our Discovering Careers in STEM webinar put on by the North Central STEM region of the Iowa Governor's STEM Advisory Council. My name is Carrie Rankin. I'm Associate Director with the STEM Council based out of our Operations Center in Cedar Falls, Iowa, helping out Kelly facilitate our event this afternoon. And I want to say thank you to all of you through the school systems who have joined and are joining us this afternoon. This recording is, or this event is going to be recorded and will be made available on the iowastem.org website after we finished sometime either later today or yet this week. And as we start, I've introduced myself. I'm going to do a short introduction of our panelists today, and then I'll let them talk a little bit more about themselves as we get into some questions of the day. Our first panelist is Mason Berg, and Mason is a process development engineer at Renewable Energy Group. Our second panelist is Jason Grabe, manufacturing operations engineer at 3M. Our next panelist will be Matthew Stephen. Is it Stephen or Stefan? I'm sorry.
Stefan.
Stefan, I thought so. Production manager at Cargill. Our fourth panelist, and please forgive me if I say this wrong, correct me, Antran,
yep.
Antran, environmental engineer at Renewable Energy Group. And our fifth panelist, Carrie Wieg, principal at Envision Architecture in Des Moines, Iowa. So thank you and welcome to all of our panelists here today. We'll dive right into some questions, and I'll go ahead and ask the first question for our panelists, and then I will also put this into the chat. So as we go around, we're going to take about 30 minutes to answer the first question with each one of our panelists and then move on to a second one. And I want to thank some of the schools that couldn't join us today that added some additional questions that we have included into this discussion. They're very, very good questions, so thank you. But I'll put those questions in the chat box for you. So the first question that we would love all of our panelists to speak to and answer in regards to discovering careers in STEM is basically telling us about your job, including the daily activities and projects you work on. And please describe your career path that led you to your position. And some things to think about: what inspired you? What age did you become interested in a STEM career? And what is the hardest challenge that you face in your work? So we'll start with Matthew.
Good afternoon, everyone. Talking about daily activities, there's some pretty standard daily activities for me. The day usually starts around 6:45 with a process shift exchange. The facility that I work at is a 24-hour, 365-day-a-year operation. Our plant is running all the time. And so we have a daily meeting to go through what happened the previous day. We have production updates and looking at different metrics for how we define success, things like quality and yield and energy. And from there, it's really spending different aspects working on either projects that are short-term or projects that are long-term to try and drive savings. Some of the things that you had mentioned around, what got me interested in STEM careers. I'd actually been interested in STEM for a very long time. In middle school, I was pretty good at math and science and chemistry. And I decided about 6th grade that I wanted to be a chemical engineer, and then just pretty much lined everything up from there to get that, to go that path, and actually spent my high school making sure all my classes would set that up. One of the questions you asked is, what's one of the hardest challenges you faced in your job? And actually it's both one of the hardest challenges and one of the reasons why I love my job is there's always one more thing to work on. It's really hard at the end of the day to figure out that you've had a successful day if you've got a bunch of other projects or things to make improvements on to work on. but it's also a great reason to come back to work the next day, as you've got fun projects to work on and problems to solve.
Thank you, Matthew. Let's move next on my screen to Carrie. Same question, please.
All right, sounds good. Well, my day is very different every day. So the job I do, I'm an architect, and that's what I went to college for after I finished my high school classes. I decided to become an architect at a very young age. I had just happened upon an architect in a TV show I was watching. I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I also had just like lots of interest in STEM activities. It wasn't called STEM when I was in school because I've been at this for quite a while now, but always into science and technology and math for sure. But I think a big class that kind of swayed me was also art and just that creative spirit. So looking at those things, I get to combine all of those things into the work I do. So my job is to meet with clients that have a need in the spaces that we're all in, right? It might be your house, it might be your classroom, it might be a really tall building or something, but we meet with people and help them understand what they can achieve through their built space. And we use a lot of different strategies and techniques to be able to do that. So I've always been a kind of a puzzle solver. So I get to do a lot of that in my day-to-day activities, figuring out how to make things fit and how you build it, but also in just putting together schedules and cost for projects and things like that. So any day of the week looks a little bit different for me, but in my particular role with our office, I do a lot of project management, which means I'm meeting with clients, so an owner of a building or maybe a principal or something like that, and just talking to them about whatever project we're working on, making sure our team is getting the work done, relaying kind of where we're at, asking a lot of questions of them to really help guide them and let them understand, all the decisions that they need to make to have really successful projects. So our end game is that we want to create space because we're architects, we build buildings, we make rooms, all of that kind of stuff. So we're always working out on those steps and parts and pieces to make that happen. So as far as our role in that, we do like the drawings. So sometimes you'll see on TV the big rolls of drawings with all of these lines on them. That's what my team is doing every day, is really putting that instruction book together and collaborating with a lot of other people to figure out down to every kind of little nut and bolt that goes into building something, what that looks like and what that should be. So challenges, like architects need to be good at a lot of different things. You want to be really creative to come up with new fun ideas to share with your clients. You need to be able to speak well, to be able to relay those ideas to people. You need to be able to work together with others and really collaborate with not only people in our office, but with other engineering teams that will, some of them are responsible for deciding how big the furnace is, or, where the air is going to come from, or where your power outlets are going to be. So we work with a really big team and doing really complex things. So we also, another challenge is really how you break that down into manageable pieces so that you can get the work that you need to do done. So I mentioned, but if you're interested in these kind of pathways for design or engineering, really, if there's so many pathways that can lead to it. It's just really having an open and creative spirit about you. Certainly liking the arts and math and science is really beneficial, but lots of different pathways to get you here, just being a really good problem solver.
Thank you, Carrie. And I just want to remind our audience, our teachers and our students that are listening out there, be sure and listen, and as each of our panelists present, and try to catch on what they're talking about in terms of different skill sets, different interests. So, Carrie talked about art, and many people might not know that art is necessary in the world of architecture. So be sure and listen to those skill sets that they're listening at, or they're speaking about, because you never know what might be an interest of yours that you can lead it into a potential career pathway. So next we will go to Onhi.
Hi. So my day starts at 8:30 usually. And my main task is to calculate the the amount of greenhouse gas, like carbon dioxide, out of factories that we put into the atmosphere. So for example, when you go by a factory and see white clouds coming out of it, some of that is greenhouse gas. And my job is to calculate how much greenhouse gas REG is making. And I do a lot of it on Excel and other programming tools. My other task is to find ways for REG to produce less greenhouse gas. For example, one of the efforts we have is to encourage employees to bring in used cooking oil or grease from home, and we can turn it into biodiesel. As for what inspired me to go into STEM, I think I've always liked working on puzzles as a kid and playing video games that you can craft things in, because I really like to build things. So I think I was naturally drawn to anything that required problem solving and creativity. So I think that led me to more interest in math and science. So when I went to college at Iowa State University, I knew I wanted to go into some kind of STEM career, but I didn't know exactly which one. So for my first year, I was undecided. And I took all of the math, biology, and chemistry classes to figure out which one I liked. And once I took a chemistry lab, I realized I really liked the lab part of it, and I decided to go into chemical engineering. And the hardest challenge that I face, it would be like things that I'm not used to, like reading rules and regulations about fuel, which can be a challenge, I think, for a lot of engineers. And this role also involves a lot of collaborating with other departments, which make it a lot more complicated. But I really like getting to know how, all the other departments work.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your input and feedback on your roles and responsibilities and how you got into your passion. So thank you. Next, we will go to our next panelist, Mason.
Yeah, so as a process development engineer with REG, Renewable Energy Group, same company as On, I actually spend about a third of my time in our lab at our corporate office doing research and development. And then the other 2/3 of my time still in that same office, just outside of the lab, doing data analysis or looking at plant metrics, even some econ type work on things that I'm testing in the lab. So, projects that recently I've been working on are feedstock development, for example. So what's the starting material we're bringing into our plant? What are the new things that we expect to come on in the next kind of like 2 to 5 year time range is generally where I'm focused. How can we process those and make biodiesel or renewable diesel out of those new feedstocks? And then I also look at new processing technologies. So what are the new up and coming methods that we can actually convert now these feedstocks into our products? So all of this, like I said, in a lab is very small scale, and then I'll help orchestrate like some pilot scale, so a little bit larger now, trials, and then plant trials, and then hopefully get to full commercialization at one of our processing facilities. So as far as what inspired me, I'll probably hit on what Carrie hit on as well, just being a problem solver, enjoying that. So all through school when I was younger, very fond of math and different sciences, because they were challenging and there's problems to solve, like literal homework problems as well. But then engineering, a lot of it is about creating and solving the world's problems, and that was something that got me excited. And then also, I think it was my sophomore year of high school, so like 16 or so, I was actually able to sit in on a couple of surgeries, like foot and ankle surgeries. And that originally got me interested into STEM as a career, obviously not what I'm doing. But I went to college thinking of going to medical school after my undergrad. And so I went to Iowa State, and I knew I wanted to be like in biomedical engineering for my pre-med. Iowa State did not offer biomedical engineering as a major, only as a minor. So you have to pick a major eventually. So I ended up in chemical engineering because of some of the reasons I've already explained, and then ended up liking that more than kind of the prospect of going to med school. So that's how I got into being a chemical engineer for REG. And then some of the hardest challenges that I face at work. Yeah, so there's a few. I guess to hit on what An said, the collaboration. So being in research and development, we work with a lot of other departments that, some are technical in nature, some aren't so technical in nature. And you have to be able to communicate the important findings of what you're working on in a way that, somebody from, corporate finance, for example, can understand what they need to understand. Or somebody that's, like another engineer can understand in the detail that they need to. So being able to adjust with whoever you're working with, there's that. And then kind of a saying that my team says sometimes is that we can do anything, but we can't do everything. Basically, you're time limited. And because we're research and development, there's so many unknowns. And as you start to get into things and learn things, you also learn about how much you don't know. So that's definitely a challenge, is prioritizing, what actually are we going to be spending our time on? What's going to have the biggest impact? What's the highest chance of success? There's different things you can look at when you're prioritizing projects and ranking them against each other, and how you choose your path forward.
Thank you, Mason. Great description of kind of where you started. Obviously, it took different paths, and that was okay. I can relate to that. Starting off my potential career in chemistry and ending up in development and fundraising now. So it's interesting the things you learn along the way and how they become useful in your lifetime. So, all right, we're going to go to our last panelist before we move on to question number 2. And I'm learning some things and jotting down a few questions. So I'm just going to encourage our teachers in classrooms that are thinking, I'm not sure if you have chat capabilities, but if you do, hold on to your questions. And if we have enough time at the end, go ahead and put those in the chat, and we'll see if we can answer some additional questions that you might have. But before we go to our next question, our last panelist on this first question is Jason Grabe.
Yes, hello. My name is Jason. I'm a manufacturing operations engineer for 3M at the 3M plant in Knoxville, Iowa. So another term for manufacturing operations engineering is process engineering. So basically a process engineer on lines here in the plant. And my main focus is a technical support for our adhesive coating lines in Knoxville. I also work on larger projects for things like yield and productivity optimization, as well as some safety and quality projects. Let's see, so what inspired me and how I became interested in STEM is a little unordinary. So when I was in high school and when I graduated, I had no idea what I wanted to do, what I wanted to study. So I tried going to school a couple different times and working in the electrical field and various jobs as well. And I ended up enlisting in the military at 22, went and served 4 years, and then decided I wanted to get out when I was about 25 or 26. I knew that I like problem solving. I like to learn as much as I can about everything around me. So I knew that I wanted to focus on engineering. So I got out of the military, went to Iowa State University, and got my degrees in chemical engineering and chemistry. So the hardest challenge that I face in my work, I would say, would have to be communication. So I spend a lot of time on our manufacturing floor interacting with operators, and I also spend a lot of time on video calls with our corporate office about things ranging from design of new parts to safety projects that we're working on as a company. So I really try to be the liaison between our operations and what our corporate initiative is.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate your introduction of your career pathway and responses to our questions. Thank you, panelists, all for helping us with the understandings of where you're at in your careers and your jobs and things that you're looking for or are doing right now. We're going to transition to the next question.
I think you
Probably
jumped
did-
on mute.
You didn't probably, I'm not sure how much of that you heard, but I just said thank you for our first round of questions for our panelists. But I'm going to go ahead and we're going to transition to the next.
You're on mute again.
Carrie, you muted again.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that's happening. This is really kind of the meat and the potatoes, I think, of what our teachers and our students are really interested in hearing and looking for. And in general, the question is for all of you, what advice would you give to students interested in your field? What classes should they be taking in middle and high school? What types of experiences should they pursue in high school and college? What types of skills are important as they're preparing to go down these pathways? What level of education is required, whether it's right away or over a period of time? What are the best schools to train for in the field of work that you do? And what is the salary range in your field? And I'll put all those questions again into the chat box. So we'll go ahead and we'll go the same path around in terms of speakers. So Matthew, you are first up.
I think I'll take at least the first couple of questions and then maybe leave room for everyone else to hit on those. If you guys are as you're listening to all of us talk through, you'll hear a pretty consistent thing is all of us were very much involved in problem solving and involved in math. And, you know, I can remember sitting in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade and going, when am I ever going to use this stuff? And I use algebra every single day. The one thing that I'm sure everyone else on can also agree with is that unfortunately, unlike in school where they give you all the numbers that you're supposed to plug into the equation and you just have to figure out which equation to use, in real life, you've actually got to go out and find the numbers, then find the equation, and then actually do the work. I mean, it's a lot of figuring out what is the right thing to even put into the equation. But math, and more math would definitely be part of it. And then what type of experiences would be beneficial in high school and college? I think there's a lot to be said about getting involved in some form of organized sports. There's a lot of things that you learn that complement what you're doing in school that you learn in sports. I mean, going to practice every day teaches you how you have to manage your time, and it teaches you consistency. And every one of us has to get up in the morning and go to work and then come back home and manage making food and all the things that adults have to do. But I know being involved in sports is pretty important. It also teaches you how to be involved in a team. Every one of us talked about we have a team that we have to work with and people that the buzzword is collaborate, but it's really you just got to learn how to get along with other adults. And being involved in sports teaches you things like sportsmanship, how to win gracefully and how to lose gracefully, and how to work as a team towards a goal, which every single one of us on this panel is involved in some form of team. I also think it's really important to be involved in the arts, whether that's music, vocal, or learning an instrument, or artist, drawing, painting, those types of things. It helps you stretch your creativity. I find some of the best engineers are some of the best musicians because you learn, or they're the best cooks, or they're the best artists because you can expand your mind and think in different ways. Then the other thing I think is a great experience, especially in high school and college, is get a part-time job. Work is a natural part of life, and it's it's good to learn how to manage your time, manage your money, and learn how to work in a working environment, learn what jobs you don't want to have. Some of my best job experiences are the jobs that I never want to have again. And so I don't. I pursued something different. And so I think those are some pretty important things. And I think that then answers some of the question around what skills are important. Before we go on to the next one, you asked what's the best schools to train for your field. I think all of us on this call might agree that the best school you can go to for your job is the school that you went to. And really, when you're going to a school, especially the Division I schools, chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, they're all fantastic schools. Choose a school that's either close to home or far from home, whichever one you want to be. Choose it in an area of the country that you want to go. And you will, no matter what school you'll go to, you will absolutely love the experience that you had at the college that you went to.
Thank you, Matthew. Very comprehensive, and love listening to your responses. So with that, we'll move on to Carrie.
All right. Well, I will say put a big ditto around a lot of what Matthew just shared. Any of those classes that really encourage you to expand your mind and think about things in a different way. The math and the science are what they are, and they're great for, very analytical things, and you need that balance as well. But those other pieces that really let you explore the out there, what could be kind of things are really important. I would also add like doing something like speech, and I do so much presentation in the work that I do. And like I said, as we create ideas, and I think everybody else on the panel would agree, you have to be able to relay that to another person or a group of people or to your own team, and to be able to put your thoughts and words together in a way that makes sense and they can do something with it is really important. And it's not, and the words, maybe you guys have experienced this, but sometimes the words don't come out of your mouth how they're going through your head, right? So being able to practice that through some of your speech classes is really important. They're not the ones that a lot of people sign up for first, of course, but really important, or just to get involved with a speech club, I would add to that. And arts and music, I would also, and sports, I also highly recommend, in addition to all of your core classes. I would talk a little bit about maybe our schooling, which will be different than some of the engineers on the call here today. So for architects, we go through 5 years of college. So after you finish your high school courses, kind of the minimum, and some people do 6 years and get a master's degree, but I have a Bachelor of Architecture is what I went to school for, and I went to Iowa State. So, and I will put a special plug in for ISU as a great school to go to. So in the state of Iowa, Iowa State's the only accredited architecture program in our state. So when I went to select a college, it was a pretty easy choice for me because I knew I wanted to stay in Iowa. And that was the only place that had an architectural program that would allow me to get licensed later on. So once you complete your college coursework and you have your Bachelor of Architecture, then we go through a training program that is several years long. And then you have to take a series of exams to be able to become a licensed architect. So after my name, I have like these letters that are AIA, which is American Institute of Architects. So that means I'm a licensed architect. The engineers on the call will have other things like a PE or something else after the name to say, yeah, I've earned this degree or this license and things like that. So as you're considering these careers, look at what that pathway is and how much education is required after you finish high school as well, because there are some really great fits for one person that are not a great fit for another person. So and there's different ways to achieve them, but just know what you're kind of getting into as you're starting to look down some of these pathways. So, and then I thought maybe I would hit on just the salary range. So again, ours is a profession that you can grow exponentially, and everybody finds kind of their own place or, how they want to grow through their profession. Entry level salaries might start somewhere around, 35, 40,000, depending. So there's a lot of summer interns that we have. So we've had high school students in our office. So it just depends on kind of where you're at and where your starting point. But as you work up and through the profession, there's different levels that you kind of work through. So you start as an intern, and then you become where you're really assisting other teams. And then as you move into the next phase of your career, it might be like a project architect where you've maybe become licensed and you're starting to be able to create projects on your own and lead your own teams, but you're not quite ready to take on the whole thing and, be managing the whole, diverse team, but you're really building your skills. And then more salary comes with that. And then we move through, typically in other different firms are structured in different ways, but then you become like a project manager, like I said I was. And then you might own a firm, where we have 3 partners in our office that own the financial portion of our business. And so depending on where you're at, so salaries might range from, 40,000 all the way up to maybe 300,000 if you're the owner of a large firm or something like that. So there's quite a bit of diversity, and it doesn't mean everybody achieves one end or the other of that. There's all kinds of ranges in between, depending on where you're kind of comfortable at, where your skill sets are, and what you want to do with your career.
Thank you, Carrie. Great summary, very broad picture of the opportunities, particularly within your firm, but also the industry of architecture. I appreciate that, as well as I'm sure the students and the teachers on the line do today. So, on.
So I'm not sure what else I can say because Matthew and Carrie have covered this pretty extensively. So I'll just say the same thing. Classes like math, chemistry, and physics are really important because it teaches problem solving, and that's what the STEM field is about, basically. But I think classes like art and anything that encourages creativity is also just as important. And as for what types of experiences people should pursue, I think joining clubs and being active with things outside of school is very important. It doesn't have to be STEM related, but I think it really develops your communication skills and interpersonal skills. And yeah, like our previous panelist said, helps you work with other people and teaches time management. And I think what Carrie said about speech is really important as well. So other skills that are important, I think technical skills, very important in order for you to do the job. And I think, like Mason said earlier, communication skills are also important because a lot of times you'll be working with people who are not technical and they need to be able to understand the same thing as you. I think for level of education, this is pretty varied. It depends on what your interest is. I think if you want to start working right away, a bachelor's degree is, the minimum. And then if you want to be a researcher, then probably a PhD. And as for the best schools, well, I went to Iowa State. So like Matthew said, I think it is the best school in Iowa for engineering and design. But yeah, there are a lot of other great schools out there, depending on where you want to live. And I think typical salary range for my field, I'm pretty early out in this career, so I'm not completely sure about this one, but I think you typically start out around 60 to 80,000.
Thank you, An. Appreciate your summary of the questions and as they pertain to your specific position and the work that you do. So we'll move on to Mason.
Yeah, so what kind of classes should you consider taking? Well, whether you are interested or not interested in the STEM field, I guess my advice would be similar and in line with what other panelists have been saying, but basically try to take a wide variety of classes, get a wide variety of experiences, sports, clubs, arts, math, science, writing classes for sure too. Basically just be open to a lot of different things. You'll learn what you like and what you don't like. And kind of as you go, you'll be able to narrow down more what you want to do with your career. And also with that kind of leads to the next one, what types of skills are important. But, as you're getting all of those experiences, you'll be developing kind of a base layer of certain skills and then just continue to become more proficient in those things. And I would also say it's important to be open to new experiences, like I've mentioned, but also kind of learning how to learn. And as you're doing new things, be able to like absorb as much information as possible, and think about how you can apply that to other areas. So you might learn something in, one subject, and you might think, okay, it seems pretty specific to this area. But then, 6 months later, something comes up in a different area, like you're working on a different project or in a different subject, and you can apply, some similar methodology or learning to that. And that's really a big part too of being in STEM and engineering, is kind of being able to make sense of things that really don't make sense at first glance. So those are definitely important. I would second what On said about base level education. So I would say a bachelor's degree generally is the minimum. But even before then, like while you're in school, high school or college, you'll have internship opportunities or part-time opportunities where, maybe you can get exposure, you can shadow somebody to see if this is actually what you're interested in. Even within one field, so like chemical engineering, for example, that's what my degree is in. There's a lot of different areas you can get into. So even like, like Jason said, he was a process engineer. Well, there's, like limitless processes. So the types of work might be the same, but as far as the specifics, it's going to change a lot. And so, don't hesitate to like reach out to, if you have a family friend or, somebody, ask to shadow for a day, things like that. Just try to get exposure, work part-time jobs, even though it's not necessarily what you might be doing in your career. Well, at least you learn that and you got some hands-on exposure in a field similar or adjacent to the one that you think you'll end up in. So some of the best schools, I'll second what Matthew said, but I'm also biased to Iowa State. But really, yeah, there's plenty of great schools. If you want to stay close to home, Iowa State's a great option. Iowa is also a good option, which, hurts to say. But also plenty of schools nationwide. And I would also say, so I didn't do this while I was at Iowa State, maybe a little bit of regret there, but also there's study abroad opportunities. So the chemical engineering program had a partner sister school in Oviedo, Spain. And so I didn't do it, but everyone that I talked to that was in my classes that did do it said they absolutely loved it and it was a great experience. But the opportunity was to go over there and take a chemical engineering lab class with students from that university. And also you get to go to Europe, experience new culture, maybe different techniques as far as like delivering material within the university. So consider that as well. And then salary range. Yeah, it's pretty variable on, there's a lot of things that go into it, like where you end up, being located, how competitive the market is there, what specific industry or market you're in, and also, a lot more things that are in your control that you may not think, like negotiation. So, read up on that before you go to get your first career. And then also once you establish yourself within a company, there might be, multiple different paths that you can take. So for example, you can, progress as like an individual contributor where, through your career, you're staying more technical, doing actual like, engineering work as one might think of it normally. Or maybe you get into people management eventually and you kind of go away from actually engineering, doing math and science every day. And now you're leading a team of engineers. More and more of your time is becoming dedicated to making sure they succeed and that your team succeeds. And it's a lot more of, like choosing projects, but not doing the fine detail work, for example. And so those decisions you make as well within your career and what path you're going to take are also going to influence your salary and career outcome, I suppose.
Thank you, Mason. And I would echo the point that you made about studying abroad. And for you students again on the line, go as many times and as often as you can in terms of study abroad opportunities. You will soon find out, if you don't already, that the world is actually kind of a small place. But it's a wonderful opportunity to experience different cultures, different people around the world, see what it's like to work in different locations, but how it all comes together, how it all connects. So I would take advantage of that, definitely. So, and to finish up on this question, we'll go to Jason.
Yes, I'll have a lot of similar answers, a lot of good comments from other panelists. I would just start by saying the biggest piece of advice that I would give is to learn as much as you can about everything. So you can relate it to everyday problem solving or problem solving in your career. Yeah, a lot of the same answers as far as classes to take in middle school and high school. Obviously STEM is focused on math. So any math classes, physics, chemistry, those are all great to have a base understanding of for a career in engineering. As far as experiences, the ones that I found most beneficial in college or in high school as well is to learn as much about different companies and different areas of industries to really understand what you're interested in so that you can focus on that. As well, Iowa State has a great career fair for engineering and for STEM careers. It's a great opportunity to talk with a lot of different companies. And also a lot of colleges offer a tour of facilities of different manufacturing sites or corporate sites. They open their doors and you can learn a little bit about companies and tour the facility. Yeah, so education. So as for engineering, I'd say the base education would be a bachelor's degree, but I also do work with a lot of what I would call technologists in my everyday job. Some of them have associate's degrees, and they work on things like robotics or automation or things like that. So there's a little bit of a range of education opportunities as well. Yeah, so like everybody else said, all schools are great, but I did go to Iowa State as well. So I put in a special plug for Iowa State. So similar salary ranges to what I've heard from other panelists. So 3M has in their technical field, so all engineers start in a technical field, and then you have the opportunity to continue up the technical ladder, or you can change over to a managerial scale. So there becomes a wide variety of responsibilities and then salaries that go along with that.
You, Jason, appreciate your input, all of your input really from all the panelists here. I would just, I'm going to remind the teachers and others on the call, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat box here, and we can get to those. I have a couple of questions, and these are really for anyone that would want to answer them. First of all, did any of you ever make mistakes or fail in your careers as you were going along? And what did you learn from that? What was the greatest opportunity or greatest thing that you would say that you learned from that experience?
Well,
I can go.
Oh, go ahead, On. I'll wait.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't call it failure. I would call it a learning experience.
I'm just going to say that maybe failure wasn't the right word, but
yeah.
did you make mistakes along the way?
Yes, I definitely did. So once I got my degree, the biggest challenge I faced was the interviewing process itself. I was very unprepared for it because I was only focused on classes and I had no idea what employees wanted because I never really participated in like any industry outings. So eventually I did find a job, worked on safety data sheets for a company. but I was more interested in the renewable fuel industry. So I kept applying for for new jobs. And eventually I landed another position at a biofuel related company. And then I worked my way up, and then I got another job at REG. So I would say like, probably should have started earlier, taking those beach classes, being more active outside of school, and then persistence in pursuing what the career you want.
Thank you, Carrie. We'll transfer over to you now.
I was just going to say that I think that these professions, you would tend to get a lot of people that like to be perfectionists because you really want to be really artful at the craft of what you're doing. If it's like designing or creating, doing the engineering behind something. And so I find a lot of people in these STEM careers have a lot of difficulty talking about failure, and everybody experiences it though, right? I mean, nobody's perfect, and we know that, and nobody expects anyone around them to be perfect, but it's like all this self-imposed is just like something that comes out it's crazy in a lot of personalities that go in these fields. However, there is a lot of strategy around that. And if you start looking at, there's some things called like lean processes that help you think about how to work through problem solving at, like at a corporate level. And probably everybody on this call has been, on the professionals on the panel here, have been a part of a lean process. There's a lot of conversation about how and when to fail, and making it a part of your conversation and okay. And we're just going to take that, and that's where the greatness comes from, right? Because of it's kind of like when someone said, I learned more from the jobs I didn't like. Maybe that was Matthew that said that, but then I did from maybe the ones I did like. It's the same kind of thing professionally, like, like, oh shoot, I did that not right, but guess what I learned from that? I'm not going to do that thing again, but now I learned this about myself or about my team or about this project, and it makes it like infinitely better. And you wouldn't have ever arrived there if you didn't have what you perceived as failure. So it's just that negative piece that we put in our minds about fail that we have to get past. And but it's really interesting, and I encourage some of the teams and the schools to maybe look into some of those lean strategies and how that's covered there. It's really great to learn, and the earlier you can do it in your life, the better.
Great advice, Carrie. And the reason I asked that question, I want all of you to know it's okay to fail. That's the way that you learn, by making mistakes. You take that information and you change what you've done and you make it better. So I just wanted to incorporate that into the conversation. I see that we have
Can I add on to that as well?
Absolutely, Matthew. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine. I think you asked what's one of your greatest failures, and I've had several times, and I can think of specific ones where I've made a decision or performed an act that has shut down a multi-million-dollar plant for several hours. And those are really like gut-wrenching feelings. And I'll add to what Carrie said, is those become markers in your mind of what not to do again. And the real key is going back and learning from that experience and saying, what decisions did I make or not make correctly, and how do I not make those again? None of us on this call are trying to put a rover on Mars or trying to put a telescope into space. And just like everyone said, the reason why creative writing and art are so important for these types of careers is a lot of times when you're solving a problem, you're starting from a blank sheet of paper. No one hands you the answer. No one hands you the question. No one hands you the numbers that you need to put in. You've got to go out there and find it. And so being in that, you are going to make mistakes, because all of us are part of businesses. Businesses make money on time. And so sometimes you just don't have the time to be a perfectionist and go to the nth degree to try and solve a problem. So you are going to make errors. The key is really figuring out, how do you work with others? How do you get the information that you need, so that whatever error decision you make has either less of an impact when you fail or is successful when you accomplish it.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm hearing the keywords again: teamwork and collaboration, working together and learning how to do that. So I want to get to one other question that Kelly suggested, but I do see one, a really good one actually here from Evelyn O'Connor's class and her sixth graders. Would you consider yourself introverts or extroverts? And does that impact your job? And again, I'll just open this up to all of the group.
I can go ahead and start. I would say I'm definitely an introvert most of the time, but there are times that you need to be able to flip the switch and need to be able to have conversations with a wide variety of people. So I've mentioned that I have a lot of interaction with operators every day, so have to be extroverted and seek out operations crews to find out any information that I can, and just to ask some questions so that I can learn, expand on my learning. So I'd say I'm definitely more introvert, but you kind of have to be able to be a mix.
Anyone else like to respond to that?
I'll add to that. I think being an introvert is a real benefit. I am also that way, but I've trained myself to be an extrovert when I'm at work and giving presentations and things. So it's like I just build and build and build to learn these extrovert activities I need to do to perform my job. But being an introvert, you have to be able to listen really well to what's going on around you and to what the problem is at hand. And I think that introverts kind of have a leg up on that because they're able to sit back and take it in and really process that stuff in your mind before you blurb it out what you think is going to be or jump to conclusions and things. So I think there's a real benefit to having that inside of you. Not that everybody has to be that way, but I see it, I witness it a lot in the people around me.
Carrie? Anyone else?
I'll add one quick thing. So I'm also introverted, and I guess regardless of, if you're introverted or extroverted, I would encourage you to find, somebody that you look up to that is successful, and, if they're deeply introverted as well, and so are you, but, they manage to, practice and become successful in their own field, then, maybe they can become a mentor for you, and you can learn how they manage that through their own career. And you can have some of the same learnings without maybe some of the same experiences. So something to think about.
Great point, Mason. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if there's anyone on this call as the panelists that aren't an introvert, and probably on a Myers-Briggs fall into the thinking versus feeling side. Probably fall more into the thinking. But even though those types of things gravitate you towards some of these STEM roles, it doesn't hamstring you into anything. And I think similar to what everyone says, you have to learn how to take your skill set and complement it with things that aren't necessarily in your skill set. And I manage people. I have to meet with people every day and talk about their careers and help them with their career aspirations. And I think I'll really emphasize what Carrie said around, you've got to listen. And I think it gives you a leg up where instead of spending a lot of the time talking, you're spending a lot of time listening and processing, and your response can be something where it can be really helpful to others.
So that kind of goes into the second question about, is there anything you didn't think you'd have to do that you actually have to do each day in your work? So Carrie talked about just sitting back and listening and other things, but would there be any additional thoughts from any of the panelists on that question?
I would say I have to do so much more technical writing than I ever thought I would have to do. So I would maybe add that to my core classes. Any composition or advanced composition classes you can take are really beneficial, because you'll be surprised in how many things you have to put, not only have good speaking skills, but written skills as well. So I just didn't know that I would be doing all of that as a professional. So.
I know we're getting close to the end of our time. I just want to throw out one more question that I think is a good one. And if each of you panelists could maybe take just 10, 15 seconds and quickly describe any job opportunities that you see in your field or expected job growth looking to the future. Maybe talk to our participants on the call today about that. Any growth opportunities or job opportunities now or going into the future that our students might not even know about or think about?
I think for my position, which is life cycle analysis and greenhouse gas calculation, that's definitely a growing field with a lot of communities being concerned about, carbon emission, and they have efforts to become more green. I think, yeah, there's definitely a lot of growth in my field.
Anyone else?
Sure, I can go ahead. More specifically to process engineering and working in a plant like myself, I think that a real focus in the near future and just future overall would be process automation and robotics. It's something that we're looking to for process optimization. I know there's a lot of that out there already, but there's definitely room for improvement, and that would be a great field to get into.
I'll echo the process automation and optimization. Those are things where we're having humans do a lot less tasks and having robots and the process and computers do a lot more of them. And so that's definitely an area to get into. But the future belongs to problem solvers. I mean, if you like to solve problems, hopefully you've heard every single one of us talks about each of us is given a problem and works through it and tries to solve the problem. And regardless of what skill set you bring to that, if you're excited to solve problems, that's going to be an area of growth in any industry.
Any other feedback from any of our panelists on that or anything else? Well, I want to close us out here. I see it's 2:00, and I want to close us out here by saying a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank Kelly Bergman for setting this up for everyone and giving both our panelists the opportunity to share their experiences, and also the other participants on the call the opportunity to learn and listen and hear more about opportunities that might be available for them in the future. I want to thank all of our panelists on the line here. What you do every day is very important to the sustainability and growth of our state. And we are very thankful that you do what you do, but also thankful that you're willing to take time out of your busy days and share those experiences with our students and our teachers. I would just encourage a couple of things. You heard a lot about teamwork, collaboration, internship, mentorships. Take the time, this is more for our educators and students, but take the time to reach out to folks like our panelists here. And I could check with Kelly to see if we can even share their contact information. And if we can, we will make sure that we get that out to those that are on the call. But pick up the phone, go visit their offices, whether it be through a simple visit, job shadow, internship, at all levels. Middle school, high school, into college, that's the best way that you can learn is by experiencing and seeing things in action. And it'll help you figure out if it's something you like to do or don't like to do. And it's a great opportunity to do that earlier in life rather than later in life. I will just say that. So take advantage of that. And then lastly, I just want to put a little plug in regards to some of these things that we do with the Iowa STEM Council, two in particular for our teachers and our students. One of the, I think it was Jason mentioned, with the Iowa State has a career fair every year. All around the state of Iowa, our 6 regions have what are called STEM festivals. And many times we are looking for both organizations such as yours to participate and show with hands-on activities what STEM means or what kind of skill sets are being practiced in your environments, in your businesses. So we love to have those as exhibitors, and we love to also have the teachers and the students come around and see those experiences and touch and feel them and have the opportunity to talk to the professionals and set those conversations in place and getting them going. and building relationships, which leads into the second thing that I will talk just very quickly about, but it's called our teacher externship program. And it gives teachers an opportunity to go into a deeper dive with businesses and organizations across the state of Iowa. They'll work for about 240 hours or roughly about 6 weeks during the summertime in a business, working on very specific projects or multiple projects that are real and authentic. And then they could take that learning back into the classroom and they can answer that question. I think someone asked before, why do I need to learn math this way? I've heard it from my daughters a million times. So they can say, you do because I practiced this with Envision Architecture or any of these businesses on the line and any sector or trade that's out there. So if you're interested in something like that, let me know and I can get you connected with that process. But it's about asking questions. I always say the only silly question is the one that you don't ask, and being creative and thinking outside of the box and being innovative. Hopefully you picked up some of those themes and connections through the conversations today. So again, thank you all for participating in our Discovering Careers in STEM webinar today. Kelly, I will just turn it over to you in case you have any final thoughts or comments that you'd like to add.
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, I just want to say thank you again. And for the teachers and classes that are online, we will be uploading this webinar to the STEM Council website. And I'll send an email to all of those who registered so that you can watch it with multiple classes or watch it again if you'd like. And you can share it with other classrooms as well. So thank you, everybody. And also, I do want to put a shout out to Jared Brown. He is a member of the North Central STEM Advisory Board, and he helped plan this panel. Couldn't have done it without you, Jared. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Well, thank you all. I'm going to be cognizant of your precious time, both in schools and in your businesses. So thank you again, and we hope to do this again in the future. Have a great day, everyone.